Hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. My name is Adam Shore. I'm the USGM of Drift. We're doing high quality live streams with artists. Um, I'm here with Michelle Cable from Panache. Michelle is a manager and a longtime booking agent, and with Tom Windish from the Paradigm Agency. Tom is also a longtime booking agent, as well as just started a record label and has a live stream series as well that he started this year. So let's begin with, throughout time, some of the greatest art has evolved from periods of struggle. The music industry is in real pain right now. The artists that make music, the people that support those artists, the structures that support those people. But quite often, great new ideas rise from this type of pain. A recent example being the download frenzy around Napster in the early 2000s with piracy evolved into streaming, easily the biggest revolution in the music industry in a generation. Live music is closed now for the first time ever, and the industry has a giant opportunity to reinvent itself. I'm going to start with Michelle. Michelle, when artists are touring again, what aspects do you see being different than they were pre-COVID?
I think a lot is going to be different in the touring industry and in the music industry in general. But I think the way we plan tours and the protocols that artists, crew, venues, festivals, promoters are going to have to take is going to be much more specific. It's not going to be as relaxed, down from guest lists to ordering drinks to loading into a venue, and how we structure deals and confirm shows and how last minute changes will happen up until the day of the show because of the precariousness of the COVID situation in this country. So I think we're going to be expecting a full overhaul of how we work in the live touring industry, and we don't really know what that's going to be yet. We'll just have to see as the next months start to happen, and hopefully we'll all be in a concert, even if it's masked and socially distanced, watching live music, because I sure miss it. The longest time in my life I've gone without seeing a show.
You manage an Australian artist that's already starting to play live again. What kind of protocols have gone into those shows?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of Australian artists, and one of them has a big festival coming up in the upcoming month, and another artist played a show on New Year's Eve. So recently already played a show. And from talking to their tour manager, it sounds like there's already in place contact tracing for anyone who's actually within the venue, the artist, the crew, the fans. You have to, check in at any place you go from state to state. If you get a coffee, go to the grocery store, you scan a QR code. And so that is, keeping track of anyone who might have been at a hotspot. And then I know also one thing that the venue has to pay for is a COVID marshal, which is someone who pretty much is at the show as like an additional security guard overseeing that people actually wear masks and are following safety measures. Another thing being implemented is COVID safety training for any artist or crew that want to attend a venue. I mean, probably in some very small concerts that isn't happening yet, but I think a new thing that they're implementing in shows at like larger venues and festivals is being trained in this COVID safe method, that I think is going to be cohesive and consistent from venue to venue, hopefully. But another thing that has to happen, which is going to take a lot of planning, is every artist, crew, and team have to provide a COVID safety plan before the show is actually happening and confirmed. And so shows already take months and months of planning. Festivals take months and months of planning. So it's just this whole other layer of organization and educating ourselves, from the roadie up until the artist on stage.
Um, Tom, how are you? How do you see things going forward in the short term while we're still in a pandemic and in further out being different from the way they were before COVID?
Well, I think the things that Michelle's talking about is really, really interesting. I feel like in America, artists and their crews will take on that responsibility themselves. There won't be a national protocol that says you need to do it like this. I don't even think there'll be a state protocol that says you need to do things like this. There might be some regulations or guidelines for venues in certain cities or states. And And some artists who are fortunate to have really high quality crew and tour managers and everything will go out there and learn how to do this. And plenty of bands won't have that luxury or just won't have the means to be able to do that. Just like some bands get their friends to drive the van to the show. That's different than a professional tour manager who's been doing this for a really long time and takes it upon themselves to figure out what COVID protocol even means. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm very envious of Australia and some other countries that are treating the pandemic much differently. I think it's early to have any sort of idea of how it's really going to pan out. I think, in our industry, all we really want to do is be able to plan and know. I've rebooked tours 5 times, and like that's what I'm good at, and the promoters, they want to book the shows too, festivals. As soon as they get a green light or an inkling that they might be able to do something at a certain time, they've got a lineup, and some of them are announcing, and then sometimes they end up pushing it back. I think a big thing we don't know yet is how will the money, the additional costs that are incurred for any sort of COVID protocol, whether it's government mandated or not, how will that affect the artists? And I'm confident, and unfortunately, I'm sure that it will affect the artists negatively. That the venues they're going to pay their bills and their staff, before they pay the bands. Just like in the old days, if I don't know, if the venue needed to have an extra security guard for some reason, that's the cost that the band ultimately incurs. They might not realize it, or maybe they do, but they do. So we'll see. And it's going to be different from every venue. I just heard about a venue today in New York that has kind of changed their deal structure completely, and they're just doing door deals after a pretty high amount of costs. And this venue used to give guarantees, and the costs were much lower. I think it's too early for really any venue to really know what the finances will look like, and I'm sure they base that on how are they going to pay their bills all year and stay open and maintain a level of profit to keep going. I mean, the other thing is like a lot of these venues weren't making that much money before, so the money's got to come from somewhere. I guess another thing that'll happen is ticket prices will increase. I don't know that like bands will just say, "Oh, sure, I can play for half as much as I used to make, no problem." And another obvious place to get that money is from the fans. And I suppose, I mean, I haven't really thought about this much, but I suppose like ticket prices have been kind of low for a really, really long time. When you see like the movie business and it costs $15 to $20 to buy a ticket to a movie, not to mention all the other stuff. And a lot of bands are charging the same amount of money to get into their show, but what you're actually getting is all these humans that travel there and now will have to go through all these health things. I think it's reasonable to charge more for tickets. Another long-term effect that we have no idea is like what's going to happen when there's twice as many bands touring at the same time and maybe tickets are higher than they've ever been. How long will the interest last? How long will music fans be able to support that? Who knows? We got a ways to go before we can figure it out.
Michelle, how have you seen your bands take advantage of this time away from the road? A lot of your bands are real road horses and haven't been able to tour for so long. What have they been doing with their time?
Yeah, it's been a very different experience for all the artists I work with. Most of the bands I work with, they make the substantial amount of money of their careers on the road. I mean, most artists, that's how they sustain themselves. It's where they sell the most merch. They sell a lot of records. Fortunately, a majority of the artists I work with, especially the ones I manage, have been able to take this time and get really creative with it. Some of the artists I work with, who are used to being on the road for a decade, who, and they were such road warriors, they've taken this time to heal, and get healthy and become a little more human again, because there's a lot of expectations when you're in a touring cycle to continue to tour. It's a lot, even if you're only playing 50 shows a year, but a lot of artists play 100 shows a year. So I think this has been a time where a lot of people have been able to sit back and accomplish goals that are outside of the touring, market. And that has gone from, a lot of artists I work with have gotten more into producing other artists, collaborating, working on writing that could land more syncs, just getting really creative and more open-minded about that. Because I think especially I work with a lot of independent artists that were, maybe hesitant about doing certain things with other artists and just sticking to writing their own music. A few artists that I manage have started their own labels through distribution companies directly, where they have more control. I'm very hands-on with a lot of my clients. So and I think it's really important moving forward that anyone who's going to be out there putting themselves at risk have to make sure they're working with a team of people that care about them. That's really important, that you're not just being forced into an unsafe situation, since, as Tom was saying too, like what's happening in Australia is probably going to be really difficult to implement here. And, state to state, there's so many different rules. So it might be this thing where people have to pick and choose what area of the country they feel is safest to tour in, based on the local mandates and, that happen. But, one of my artists, has been creating some weird inventions, too. And it's been really fun to watch people get really creative. But I think no one saw this happening for the last year or beyond, so, but it's been definitely like a healing time, a time to restructure, a time to really kind of think about like how you approach your, even me, like from running my agency and management company, of just like how you approach, your company and what really makes you happy. I think a lot of people in the music industry have really like taken a step back and decided like how they might restructure things, so that this time is that the silver lining of this time might actually be that, a lot of artists I work with have started families in this time too, which is pretty, cool. But I think people have gotten really creative of ways to, like find sustainability in a music industry outside of, being on the road, which is very wearisome and hard on artists and their crew. And, I agree with what Tom was saying about, a lot of ticket prices. I mean, people, like are unhappy sometimes paying over $10 for a ticket price, but, there's so much that goes into a concert. And, and I, as someone who's been in a car accident with an artist I tour manage, like there's so much risk that goes into getting from point A to point B. So I think a higher ticket isn't a bad thing, of course, still being reasonable. And I know most of the artists I work with don't want to raise tickets too much, but I think it's fair to consider that, maybe being a way to like help put more money into the show structure. But of course, being, aware of like the market you're playing in, and basing the ticket on that and what the local wages are there. And, and a lot of artists I work with have been focusing on their merch and getting really creative with starting their own like direct to consumer merch stores and fan engagement, which I think has really helped put people in touch with fans in this really real level that doesn't happen sometimes when you're playing a larger, venue or stadium or festival.
Tom, the agency world has been really shaken up. A lot of layoffs and furloughs. A lot of new companies have started. What do you think that? How do you see agents and the service that agents provide to artists being different going forward?
I mean, it's I think about this a lot, and further to Michelle's points, I think previously there was sort of this hamster wheel effect that we've had for dozens of years, where a band makes a great song, gets interest, meets with tons of labels, signs a record deal, puts out the record, tours for like a year, and then does that again for as long as possible. And there wasn't much more thought put into things than that. How are we going to make the most on the shows? How are we going to have the most streams, sell the most records? This time has given given artists a chance to sort of step back and evaluate all the different sections of their business, all the ways they communicate with their fans and they gather new fans, and try and make them better. I think there's a lot of tools out there that most artists and their teams barely use. Just use they just don't use them very well. I mean, an example is selling merch on your website. Like every band's got T-shirt up there and a beanie and some vinyl, but there's a lot more that can be done with it than just that. And I'm not just talking about more products. Like, how do you communicate with your audience the best? Also, like all the socials and everything. Now, to your question, I think a lot about services that agencies provide, that they've traditionally provided, versus services that artists really need. Social media, for instance, is a big one, and I think most artists don't have like experts that are helping them with their social media strategies. Another is like all this e-commerce stuff, and I wonder, like, I don't know that agencies will really do it, but people that help like look at your e-commerce or your e-strategy across everything are really, really interesting. I'm talking to different people that they kind of go out to any type of creator on the internet, a podcaster or different people that have huge audiences, and they're like, let me get under the hood of your business online and look at how you're doing everything, and barely anyone's doing it very well, because like why would they? They're experts at the thing they do, being a creator, and then there's all this other stuff that you're also expected to know how to do really well. I mean, like Instagram is just like one of the easiest examples. Like, why is you just assume everyone knows how to be great at communicating with their fans through Instagram? Like, where do you learn about that? Is there like one book everyone reads and then they're awesome? And who do you hire? Like, yeah, there's a few people to hire, but that's who the biggest artists in the world are using. Yeah, I don't know that agencies will do it, but those are valuable additions that I think they should consider doing.
So since since there seems to be so many kind of new services that are to have, seems to that it would come down to the responsibility of the agent or the manager to support the artist in these things. Um, as a manager and an agent, how where do you see the responsibilities lying, and how do agents and managers ramp up really era?
I mean, I think right now what's happening with live streaming, where a lot of artists have been live streaming and then doing merch add-ons, with the tickets to generate more revenue. A lot of Some agents are taking on this role, and a lot of managers are taking on this role. Some are working together. Some are like some agencies. I know Tom created something as well, like in the live streaming world, are creating their own platforms, so that there is no third party that you have to pay, because a lot of these streaming platforms take a percentage, which is a small percentage, but when this is the only way most artists are making money, it matters. So I know some agencies have been creating streaming platforms on their own, and then working directly with the manager or artist. But I know some managers have gone direct to a platform, and then even, I think it depends on the artist, like where maybe they commission a little bit off of, managers are used to commissioning off of merch. I don't really know how other agents are doing this too, but it's different from case to case. But I think, as Tom was saying, we've all been so reliant on this sort of like, okay, touring is the way most artists make money, so this is what is just going to, festivals make so much money, so this is just how we focus on like sustaining ourselves. But now everyone's had to take a step back and get really creative, and I think that's going to continue, because artists have now figured out it's a way to make money, engage with their fans more, and and do it well. As a manager who also has run multiple festivals and who also is a booking agent, when I started doing only a few live streams since the pandemic started, I was apprehensive about doing it because I never posted a story on Instagram in my life. And I know a lot of the social media marketing is so important. So I partnered up with a promoter, because as a booking agent and as a manager, I still don't consider myself a promoter. That's why you use a promoter at a venue. When when you book a show, a lot of times you'll use a promoter to actually market. And so I joined forces with a promoter to help me with the social media outreach. But now after doing that, you learn quickly, and I feel very confident in doing it, on my own. And I understand Instagram or Facebook to a certain degree, but it's always evolving and changing. And I think the structures of hiring a social media person within, a booking agency, or a management team, or someone who's really savvy at that, it has suddenly become much more real, because that sort of like street marketing that we're so used to happening, or flyers are such a thing in the past. I used to love making handbills for shows, and I know how to use Photoshop and make flyers, but that was a dying industry, print media. And now, like, social media, the sizing, the stories, the algorithms of how to get your post seen, those are all things that we need to teach ourselves. And and I think the more people that know how to do it, the artist, the booking agent, the manager, and just working together, whoever's involved in something, is helpful, because at the bottom line is everyone has been impacted by this in the world, but especially in the live entertainment industry. And we were the first to shut down, and we'll probably be the last to open based on what we're seeing. And so we really need to think about how we can all work together, and of course take care of the artists, because that's why that's why Tom and I both have, careers, is because of the artists we work with,
Right.
and keeping them, safe and happy. And and I think, that's just something we all have to keep brainstorming as we're in this weird holding pattern right now too.
I think a wonderful thing. It would be wonderful if what came out of this was artists tour a little bit less, figure out how to make the same amount of money as they were before, and have more time to focus on other things, between songwriting and families, and doing other things. Mental health is something that I think there was more attention paid to it in the last few years, but not nearly enough. And artists need to step back and get off the hamster wheel, a lot. And I hope that this has actually been a good thing for them in that regard, in a lot of ways. I know financially it's devastating, but I do hope that and I've talked to a lot of my clients. I think they do appreciate, like, not being on the road all the time, and seeing their family more often. It's really important. And if they can figure out how to do that more in the future, that would be great.
We've had a lot of success at Drift by helping build these kind of direct-to-fan ecosystems with artists. These live streams are really a way where you can not only connect directly with the fan, but monetize that experience and reach a global fan in a way that you really weren't able before. Tom, have you seen success on that front with your artists and places where it could go?
Building more direct to fan relationships. Yeah, definitely. I've seen a bunch of my clients just spending a lot more time on their socials and building much bigger audiences there, and monetizing them. And then, artists doing all sorts of streaming stuff, from just streaming live from their Instagram to, the ticketed ones, and everything in between, and having much larger audiences there than they would have in the past. So yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Thank you both. And we will end the panel now.